Welcome, everybody, to the Apex Sunday podcast. We're hosted by two petrol heads, myself, John Dowsett, and Rob Ross. And this is the podcast that banters and rambles on about Formula One races, news, and events.
John, the Red Bull Ring is a very short circuit with pole just over 63 seconds for a complete lap. When you were racing, did you prefer racing on short, high-speed circuits or long circuits, or did you even have that kind of variety in your time?
I didn't have that variety.
Right.
I liked this short track because yes, people got lapped more than usual, but there's always something going on.
Right. Yeah. Definitely in terms of lapping, it was rather large. We had Mazepin and Latifi were lapped 3 times. And then we had Mick was lapped twice. And then Antonio Giovinazzi up to Lando Norris in 4th was lapped once. So it definitely shows it's a great circuit. I really like it because there's no super slow corners, maybe corner 1 to an extent. But other than that, and maybe corner 3, they have to brake a fair amount. Other than that, it's quite flowing and quite fast. But, the drawback is that we're going to have lots of people lapped in this.
And passing opportunities. The track, unlike most tracks today, people can actually pass, which is nice to see.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And nice and wide, lots of elevation change. The only thing that bothers me is you really don't see the elevation change on television.
Not particularly, do you? Because I was thinking about that as well. I really like the short circuit, the fast corners, but I also like elevation changes. When I thought about it, it's like, well, there is elevation changes in this circuit. It's just not particularly obvious. So.
And for me, uphill corners are a cakewalk, and downhill corners are the ones that are going to give you trouble.
Right.
And there's some really nice downhill corners on this one.
Yeah, that whole last sequence, right?
Oh, man. Yeah. It's just beautiful.
It is. It's very good. Let's talk about qualifying.
It was up and down, wasn't it? It was looking like there were going to be some changes.
Latifi was a bit of a surprise, right? In Q1, he sort of threw a wrench into the proceedings because he was up in 8th. But ultimately, he missed out of Q2 by 8/100ths. And his teammate, Russell, missed Q3 by 8/1000ths. So there's a little bit of symmetry there.
Crazy.
But it forced others to use more tires than they wanted to. And of course, Russell did eventually outqualify Latifi, and Ricciardo just made it into Q2. The other thing is Ocon. He's having some trouble after his promising start. It had sort of that, I've just signed a factory team contract for 3 years. Now I'm going to not deliver anymore. So he's drifting back a little bit. So we'll have to see how that pulls out throughout the rest of the season. What did you think of Ocon?
Yeah, it surprised me, and how much of that has to do with Alonso, because Alonso is definitely going to have some guidance on setup of the car and development of the car. I don't know how much development they're doing, but Alonso has a history of not being very nice to teammates.
No. And he's improving as Ocon is not improving or not staying consistent at the time.
Possibly the car's being developed for him. And the other surprise for me was Danny Ricciardo, because Danny in free practice was showing real speed. And I was thinking, oh my God, finally Danny's got it. And then I don't know what happened in the race. I didn't hear anything about what happened in the race, but
yeah, he just qualified 14th, which
and qualifying. Yes.
Compared to his teammate though, way back, because Lando qualified 4th, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
That's quite a contrast. And of course, he does have experience with McLaren's type of car. But yeah, it's 7 or 8 races in and Danny's still struggling. So that's a bit of a surprise. We saw the AlphaTauris get into Q3. The Honda engine and the aerodynamics of both Red Bull teams look well suited for this kind of circuit. And again, like I said, Norris qualifying 4th. He starts 3rd because of Bottas's penalty. Gasly 6th. That's just amazing as well. Poor lap for Lewis, but he gets on the front row anyways because of Bottas's penalty. And I thought that would be a good opportunity for him to make a great start, but that didn't happen. And we had Johnny Herbert in the post-qualifying interviews, and he must have went to complete sentence school because for once it wasn't all word salad. Do you have any other thoughts about qualifying?
Not really. I enjoyed it, and there was some drama, which was good, and some surprises.
Yes, yeah, the AlphaTauris in particular, and because we've seen Tsunoda suffer recently in qualifying, but he did well this time.
And Bottas, it was nice seeing Bottas where he got to the top of the chart, near the top of the charts, one down.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the race then.
Perfect.
The race obviously started with a bit of a mess up with Leclerc and Gasly, which also bled over to Latifi and Giovinazzi. That did let Leclerc, though, make quite a good comeback, didn't it? From his wing incident with Gasly, the puncture, and then Leclerc having to pit at the first lap and then come back to 7th.
It gave me what my favorite thing in car racing is. I love watching these great drivers come from the back and just hammer through the field.
Right.
It's got to feel wonderful.
Right. So you should be looking forward to the sprint race in Great Britain in a couple of weeks to see how that all works out. Yeah, me too. We see some cars go well at circuits. Like, for instance, Force India used to do very well at Spa, I think even finishing on the podium. So we saw a little bit, this kind of circuit has that kind of thing where we saw, of course, Red Bull and Mercedes way ahead of everyone else, but the midfield was definitely mixed up a little bit compared to the other races.
I'm not hearing the banter that I used to hear about downforce. One of the reasons Danny was getting up front and doing so well in past years is because he likes a low downforce car.
Which the Red Bull is traditionally a low downforce car, right?
Yes, and so he moved teams and went to a low downforce car and would routinely be ahead of his teammate. What's happening here?
But now, I mean, he had that power loss in the race, so the race is a write-off for him because he was up to 8th from 14th, so he did a good start, but then he dropped down, or I guess he started 13th maybe because of penalties, but anyways, he had that power loss, and then after that, he was a no factor.
The start, the event at the start, what was your take on that?
I think it's your standard sort of so many cars pushed up against each other in the first corner. It is the tightest corner on the circuit, I think, or maybe turn 3. Kind of inevitable, I guess, to an extent. It's just, it seemed rather easy. Like there were little touches and caused a hell of a lot of problems for a lot of drivers. How much of contact did you have when you were racing? Because you're racing sedans, not open wheel. So does that encourage more contact?
Not in GT racing.
No,
not in GT racing at all. Some bump drafting up back straights, but that's about it. I mean, I had a Camaro think that he could take me on the inside of corner 3 at Mosport, and of course there wasn't a chance in hell, and so he ended up sliding into me. He thought he could go in as fast as I did, and he couldn't.
Right.
And then I had a Fiero punt me in corner 5 and roll me. But those are the only 2 real contacts I had. I think the other contacts of bump drafting up the back straight or something that you kind of want.
Right. I guess the other big story about the race is this is the 4th consecutive victory for Red Bull and Honda. They must be, Honda in particular, they've had such a terrible re-entry, basically, not very good with McLaren. McLaren blamed Honda. I think it was a combination of both McLaren and Honda with that Concept Zero making the engine too hot for Honda. But, they're doing so well now, and next year it'll be a Red Bull engine and not a Honda. Yeah. Even though it is a Honda. It's interesting. I said to you once that Honda doesn't really need Formula One to sell cars, but there is a reason for going into F1. And what do you think of Honda pulling out just as they're succeeding? I don't think
you're probably regretting it.
Yeah. Do you think there's probably no chance of changing their minds after all that's happened?
It could also be a major shift for Honda. I mean, this is outside of the world of Formula One, but there's such a shakeup right now in the auto industry with EVs and alternate fuels.
Yes.
Toyota with their hydrogen car, and where are they going? Do you want to try and catch up to Tesla with EVs, or can that really work? And So there must be so much nonsense going on at the upper level of these companies that I can understand where they're looking at spending hundreds of millions of dollars at least.
Yeah, they're not in Formula E, though. The E strategy will be very interesting to see how the various companies tackle that, because Mercedes is pretty strongly into Formula E, but Honda is nowhere. Even in bike racing, none of the major manufacturers have electric bikes. They're all independent electric bikes. So it's going to take a while. It'll be, by the time we meet our maker, as they say, in 20 or 30 years, hopefully, it'll still be a mix of combustion and electric and, all of the infrastructure and all that. But yeah, they must be regretting pulling out just as they're becoming very, very successful and getting a lot of press. Yeah, too bad.
I think those days of being in Formula One to develop technologies for manufacturers is gone. Mm-hmm. It once that held a little bit of weight, but I think that's gone. And that translates into Formula E, I think. And you could also add to the fact that how many people do you know that watch Formula E?
Yeah, zero.
And how prevalent is it? All my petrol head friends, shouldn't say that, all of my racing friends, none of them have ever even brought up Formula E.
Yes. And you've taken a look at it, right?
I took a quick look at it. If there was an easy feed for me to watch it, then I'd probably be watching it.
Yeah. Because
it looks interesting. Mm-hmm. But I don't watch much other racing other than sports car racing.
Right. Yeah, when I watched it, the circuits, I didn't care for the circuits. They were very, very tight. It was all street circuits and not my favorite, that's for sure. But again, it's an evolving series. I think they're in their second generation of cars, so they don't have to switch batteries or switch cars anymore. And then there's a third generation coming soon. So it's definitely a more research focused, at least obviously, to how they set it up, so that it's like, well, we're going to take steps. We're going to take a few years of this formula. We're going to improve it. So, it's definitely something that interests some companies, but I haven't seen Honda in there at all, or in any kind of electric racing.
I think they can prove it themselves. They can use their test track,
right,
and take their electric cars and test them without going into Formula E. And I'm not so sure how much Formula E provides in the way of R&D for manufacturers. There's got to be some.
Well, the battery technology, I think, is the primary R&D, but, is that type of battery, can that be adapted to a regular road car and, that kind of thing? So something to look up for the future. I did enjoy the Tsunoda-Alonso rivalry. They seem to be racing each other here and there throughout the races, so that was pretty cool. And the coverage, I would say, was pretty good. The battles at the edge of the points were shown, and they weren't shown all in the stack for a change. So that was good. I guess the biggest question is, will Max whip their asses again in the race coming up? Because he totally destroyed Hamilton, didn't he? I think it was a 15-second gap at the end. Oh, no, well, 35, but that's because Hamilton pitted for the fastest lap.
Right.
But before that, it was about 15 seconds. And that's quite a significant margin over Mercedes on this circuit.
What's your take on Perez?
Well, where did he finish? He finished fourth, 47 seconds. So I found the commentators thinking that Perez could get Bottas. I didn't really believe that was going to be the case. I mean, towards the very end, he got pretty close, but other than that, I don't know.
It was under a second. He was under a second.
Yeah.
And I have a funny feeling that Perez is managing the car. Mm-hmm. I know Max is. I know Max has got just a bagload of speed and is probably driving 15%, 20% below where he can, just to manage tires and manage fuel and stay on the track. Perez is probably managing his money because he's got big sponsors.
He does, yes. But he's delivering, right? He's doing what they wanted him to do, which was
get points.
Sure, he didn't beat Hamilton or Bottas this race, but he has in other races, and he came pretty close. So he's doing exactly what they need them to do. So I think that'll be a partnership that goes on through next season as well. I don't think that Perez could ever beat Max, just like I don't think Bottas could ever beat Lewis, the exact same car.
You don't think they could beat them man to man if you were to take these two guys and put them in a world sports car? And do you think that Lewis is that much better driver than Val?
Don't know really, because as soon as he changed the formula, Like you see certain drivers, I think Kimi tried rallying. I know Valentino Rossi from MotoGP tried rallying. Granted, rallying is a very, very, very different discipline than road racing, obviously. But, you still need reaction times and braking properly and all that kind of thing. So I don't know, maybe Valtteri would be better at different types of racing than Formula One. He could be a great sports car racer, and he may well end up in sports cars, right?
I was talking to Ken Slater, and Ken Slater said that quite clearly Lewis Hamilton is the greatest race car driver who's ever lived.
Oh, really? He thinks he's the GOAT. Wow.
Yes. As I've said before, I don't think you can go there.
Yeah, there is no GOAT, right?
It's just a different world. Yes, he's the best of his time. Michael Schumacher was the best of his time. Ayrton Senna was the best at his time. Sterling Moss. We can go through Jim Clark. We can go back to the early days.
Yep. Is there any driver that you've ever thought, wow, this guy really is the best? Because I have one. In sports
Ron
cars?
Fellows is one of them, yeah.
Oh, yeah? He's retired now, though, right?
Mm-hmm. He's retired.
Yeah.
A god behind the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe the greatest Canadian driver who's ever lived. I think I'd rank him above Gilles Villeneuve.
Oh, really? Wow.
But he's just too big. I mean, he's a big, tall man, and he doesn't fit in an open wheeler. They probably would today, because look at Ocon. I mean, Ocon's a big boy, right?
Yes. Yeah, for me, I'd say Marc Marquez from MotoGP comes close to, like, how can anyone be this good kind of type of guy? So, yeah, it's at the same time, though, I would say that another rider could come along just as good as him any time now or 20 years from now. So that's the problem with the greatest of all time. We don't live in all time, right? And there's always people coming along, and the movement of racing drivers, I think, in all the disciplines has been more professional, more focused. It's more of I hate to say it, a job, but you have more obligations and so forth nowadays.
Yeah, a profession.
Yeah, and they race very, very young, and they get exposed to a championship situation from a young age. So they're very much better prepared than they were in the past too. So that's got to help you be very, very good as well.
In my lifetime of being a petrol head,
mm-hmm.
I watched the change.
Yes.
There was James Hunt smoking cigarettes
yes.
and swearing, and the famous Graham Hill era parties mm-hmm. with McLaren and other boys. And I think it was probably in my 20s when that all changed and sponsorship took full hold.
Yep.
And sponsors expected the drivers to go to media training, so they knew how to deal with the press.
Yes.
That's when we started hearing the word "we" all the time, and "we" got so overused it was just ridiculous. Because
mm-hmm.
No, you were driving the car. You can say "when I passed," but no,
yep.
They would say, "No, when we passed Harry Leyendijk."
Yes. Yeah, like a guy like Kimi is probably not a marketer's dream, right? Because he doesn't speak much, he doesn't present himself very well, and all that kind of thing. I mean, I think he's great. I think Kimi's, mm-hmm. The anti-marketing type of driver in a way, right? So, but yeah, Marc in MotoGP, he's very good with the media as well. So he had it all, and he learned to speak English very early. These are savvy guys who understand it's not just show up and race and you do more. There's a hell of a lot of things you have to do to be successful. Now, having said that, when you're being paid $20 million a year, you're willing to do a lot of work, aren't you?
Yes.
John, who would be your driver of the race?
This is the toughest one yet to pick.
Me too.
You can say Chaz Leclerc for his hammering through the field. Mm-hmm. For me, it's a toss-up between Yuki Tsunoda mm-hmm. and the very unspectacular Lando.
Yep, Lando's mine. It was a brief sort of struggle between Leclerc and Lando, but when I looked at the overall weekend, Leclerc did well, but he also didn't do well initially, so there's that. But Lando he's maximizing. He's behind the top 4 drivers in the top 2 teams, and he's just getting the most out of that car. And I think
consistently.
Yes. He's just really, really impressing me. And so is Russell as well. I mean, he got very close to Q2 and he may have scored points. I think that's a bit optimistic if he didn't have his problems in the race. I think it was hydraulics, but he's very, very promising for the future as well. In terms of rating the race, I'm going to give it a 6. I enjoyed some of the off the front passing and so forth, but it wasn't, a classic race or anything. I think a real good race, I'm going to start at 7. This is just below a really good race, but I didn't mind it at all. So it gets a 6 for me. What about you?
I'd have to go with a 7.
Yeah.
Possibly even an 8 for this race. Right. And only because we got to see lots of passing.
Yeah.
That's what really stokes me. Setting up a pass, and it's not easy to do with these cars. And if you saw the turbulence when cars passed each other, it's got to be frightening as hell. All of a sudden your front end washes out.
Yes.
And so I really, really enjoyed that. And I like the coverage of the entire field, showing Seb when he's way back, or showing Kimi just driving brilliantly. And once again, Kimi did the lousy qualifying and brilliant race.
Now, one more thing I'd like to say. Last podcast, I mentioned Mercedes might be letting down Lewis. That came out wrong. Obviously, this is a very great team, have had so much success. But I saw an interview with a crew chief from MotoGP for Suzuki who had just won the world title. And previous to that, he was with a smaller team with a 2-year-old bike. And he would say that when we triumphed on the 2-year-old bike, we got good results. It was amazing. When we didn't, well, we have a 2-year-old bike, so who cares? Once he got into Suzuki, he basically said that the pressure was far, it was increased, obviously, and that risk-taking reduces as soon as you have a lot of pressure. So perhaps Mercedes is more risk-averse under this kind of pressure. What do you think? Maybe they're just not used to this kind of pressure, and do we do this, do we do that? So they're a little bit indecisive, and that's just natural because of the pressure.
That's an interesting take on it, but I question how Mercedes is developing their car. They had the pinnacle, and they rode that, and they kept developing it, yes, but they had a base that was definitely the fastest car. Now they don't. Now they're on their back foot.
Yeah, 7 years of total success until now.
And I don't think the car is capable of keeping up with what Adrian Newey has done with Red Bull.
Mm-hmm.
You have to question what Red Bull did to their car.
Yeah.
How did Red Bull change their car, and how did they take their money that they were allowed to spend, and how did they spend it?
Yeah.
And I don't know that.
It's just so strange that the first few races, they were much closer together, with Lewis winning more often than Max. And, since 4 races ago, it's just been all Red Bull.
Right.
All right. So should we move on to the news?
Yes.
All right. Well, I've seen that Mazepin is convinced his car is heavier than Mick's, and that's why he hasn't beaten him yet. So watch out for the lighter car. We'll see if that happens. And also, Mick has apparently been sitting in a tilted seat the whole season, so they have to fix his seat a little bit. He said it hasn't been a problem, but yeah.
Really?
Hasn't been proper. But I guess the biggest news for me is Porsche and Audi are joining the engine talks on July 3rd. In Austria.
Whoa.
They're thinking of dropping the MGU-H and just using the MGU-K. So one's kinetic, one's for heat. And they want to simplify the engine and also make standard parts to reduce the costs so that they're not manufacturing all their own parts. They're going to be joined by Daimler, Renault, and Red Bull, Mercedes, representatives from the FIA, and so forth. The only thing that is absolutely definite is they're supposed to have a carbon neutral fuel by 2025. So it'll still be fuel based, but it'll be a cleaner fuel.
Yes.
And then Porsche, Audi, quote, that's just basically the Volkswagen group, right? I guess they'll decide if they want to enter, but we've already mentioned Williams being connected with Volkswagen, ex-Volkswagen employees. So they're definitely interested. We'll see where that goes. And Aston Martin signs Red Bull's head of aerodynamics, Dan Fallows, but he's going to be their technical director. So he's not heading the aero department directly. He's becoming the technical director for the team. They've also poached someone else. I can't remember who, but I think he was in aerodynamics as well. But regardless, all the teams are poaching from each other and preparing for the next formula, I suppose.
Brilliant. I love this stuff. When I read the Newey book, there was a statement of him changing teams and would he change teams, and Mercedes wanted him. And he was just saying, why would I go? If I go to another team, I want to go to a team that is nothing, so I can develop it and put it at the front again, because that's what he's done with all of them, right?
Right. Yeah, it's true.
So I can see how there would be a shift if you're at Red Bull and you've got the fastest car, to have the opportunity to go to a lesser team and make them a little bit better.
Yes. Lesser but well financed too, right? They look like they have a good future. They've got better finance than when they were Force India.
Yes.
All right, well, next race is the exact same venue, so I guess the interesting thing will be if Mercedes can find a setup that will make them perform better. And I'm interested to see how Lando and Danny do, because they've got a lot of data from the first race. Let's see if they can adjust. All right, so until the next race, we'll talk to you then.
Thank you, Rob.
Bye, John.